Ferrari is one of the most well-known car brands in the entire world, and they're typically pretty expensive. So today I'm going to show you 10 of the cheapest Ferraris that you can actually get yourself into. It's as simple as that. Hit the like button if you want to see more videos like this, and subscribe as well if you're new. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let's kick this video off with the Ferrari 348 TS, which was the final V8 Ferrari ever built under Enzo's watchful eye, and it sadly only reached production after his death. It was another Pininfarina design, and though it took some cues from previous Ferraris like the sides being similar to the Testarossa, it was actually a bit of a departure from the norm for the brand. It arrived in 1989 and ran through to 1995 and was equipped with a 3.4 litre V8 engine, making 296 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 6 seconds, not particularly quick by Ferrari standards. Having actually driven one of these on track, I can tell you firsthand they are a strange car to drive. I wouldn't say comfortable with an offset pedal box and the handbrake put in a really awkward place. They do give a Ferrari experience, but I would be lying if I told you it was a car that I really enjoyed driving. These start at around £50,000 though, which is pretty cheap for a classic Ferrari, and you'll typically find them for under £75,000. Chain tensioner wear is well known on these, as well as one support bearing failing on the cam drive jack shaft. The Ferrari 288 GTO is often considered to be Ferrari's first ever proper supercar, which is why prices of them are absolutely absurd. But the 288 took much of its styling from this, the 308 GTB or GTS QV, which costs a fraction of the price. £65,000 around the minimum you'll find these listed for, and they often sit at or around the 95k mark. It arrived in 1982 and ran through to 1995 after multiple previous iterations of the 308, in this case with 4 valves per cylinder, which links back to the Quattro Valvole name, simply to try to push the power up after stricter emissions regulations had been introduced for previous generations. But even with that, it came with a 2.9 litre V8 engine, the smallest on this list, making 240 brake horsepower, the least on this list, taking it to 60 in 5.7 seconds. Clearly the regs were impacting Ferrari's ability to produce more power. You'll recognise it by the slim louvered panel on the front end, and like the 348 it comes as both a coupe and targa, but either way I actually think it's a great looking Ferrari for the money outside and in. Timing belts are typically quite expensive and require pretty regular attention, and of course as a classic Ferrari, expect to look after it as such. Next up we have probably my least favourite looking Ferrari from this list, the Mondial, which was produced between 1980 and 1993 across its multiple facelifts and modifications. It was a Pininfarina design with the famous Scaglietti doing the bodywork, so it has every right to be absolutely stunning, but this Grand Tourer just doesn't quite do it for me. Let me know if you have a different opinion in the comments down below. Even the name for me is a bit strange. Mondial means global in French, which has a double meaning. It references Ferrari's ability to adhere to global emission standards and its performance in the Formula 1 World Championships. Either way, it comes with a 3.4 litre V8 engine, making 296 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.6 seconds, and it was marketed alongside the previous 2 cars on this list. But it's not all about looks and a name. This car really was pretty decent for its time, with much of its tech being derived from Ferrari's F1 program, and as it's a 2+2 you can actually get a couple of extra passengers in it. They start at around 50k and you'll find plenty around the 70k mark. Gearboxes on these, though F1 derived, were also a key point of failure to look out for, so do be aware of that. The Ferrari F355 for me is where the brand started to really enter the modern era with its cars, picking up where the 348 left off, but drastically modernising it in many ways. It was focused on being significantly more powerful with a new 5-valve cylinder head, and more reliable with a new rod-driven transmission that heated up faster with a heat exchanger, as opposed to the sketchy cable system in the 348 that needed time to warm up. Over 1,300 hours of wind tunnel time was used to get the car to cut through the air nicely, and you still got the benefit of a slightly more classic Ferrari interior. Plus it came with a 3.5 litre V8 engine, producing 380 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.7 seconds, so all those performance focus changes clearly were working. It became a popular race car, as when it took over from the 348 in the Ferrari Challenge race series, it kind of cemented itself as being a bit of a racing icon. They'll run you around £75,000 the bottom end now, and prices have been on the up, with quite a few sitting at around the 100k mark. Burning oil quickly is known, and literally catching fire is also known, as was seen with Hoovie's F355 a few years back. We have another Ferrari that I've had the chance to drive, the 360, either the Modena Coupe or Spider convertible, with Modena referring to Enzo's birthplace. The 360 took over from the F355 as the main sports car for the brand, and took another step forward in terms of modernity. The design language had clearly changed, with a move from the boxier styles of the 80s and early 90s into the more fluid late 90s and early 2000s vibe, which I think suits Ferrari very well, as it's more reminiscent of their their earlier curvaceous sports cars. These come as either gated manuals or the F1 automated manual transmission, which can be a bit troublesome if not looked after properly, alongside a few other known problems, but broadly you should expect relatively high maintenance bills on these anyway. Check out some of Seen Through Glass's maintenance videos to see that firsthand. I thoroughly enjoyed driving this compared to the 348, with its 3.6 litre V8 engine making 400 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.5 seconds. It felt so much more poised and yet still raw, and even if the gated manual isn't necessarily the most user-friendly gearbox, it does look and sound stunning as you click through the gears. These start at around £50,000 and generally you'll find them around the 80k mark. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your personal favourite ever Ferrari? Mine is very easy, it's the Enzo. I'm a huge Enzo fan. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. On to the top 5 now, and in 5th we have the 575M Maranello, of course referring to where Ferrari have their headquarters and where most of them are made. The 575M is a front-engined Grand Touring Ferrari, which typically means depreciation is quite aggressive, which is why it makes this list, starting at around the 60k mark, with plenty listed for around 10k more than that. For that kind of money you'll be getting a 5.7 litre V12 engine making 532 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.3 seconds, and it's a Pininfarina design, though that design was adapted from its predecessor, the 550. Compared to the 550, it got a new interior, exterior mods, bigger brakes, a bigger engine, better aero, adaptive suspension, and better weight distribution too, so it's not fair to call it a facelift, it really is a different offering, and as a Grand Tourer it's hard to find many cars as exotic and attractive. It was in fact the base for one of my all-time favourite looking race cars too, the 575 GTC, so that does help. Generally these haven't been unreliable cars, maintenance is of course pretty expensive though, and only 251 right-hand drive examples were ever made, so they are pretty rare. Another V12 now, and another Grand Tourer, although this time it has a more executive purpose, which makes it quite a strange modern Ferrari. It's the 612 Scaglietti, which replaced the 456 as a much more usable 4-seater Ferrari, given it was much bigger in size. Its design is supposed to hark back to the 375mm, and it was Ferrari's second all-aluminium car, following on from the 360 we spoke about previously. It's also related to the 575 just in Super America spec, as it shares the same engine, a 5.7 litre V12 block, which makes 540 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.1 seconds, marginally quicker and more powerful than the 575M. The name Scaglietti comes from the famous coach builder who was massively intertwined with Ferrari, so much so that the 612's body was built in that factory in Modena before being shipped to Maranello for the engine and interior to be put in. It ultimately ended its life to make way for the much more modern Ferrari FF, but it definitely helped to pave the way for more modern 4-seater Ferraris that we see on the roads today, for example the Purosangue. 50k will get you into one of these, and you'll generally find a few listed at around the 80k mark. Some were recalled for F1 transmission issues and other issues aren't so common, but again maintenance costs are high. I'm starting to see how lucky I've been with cars over the past few years, but we have another Ferrari on this list that I've driven, the California. This entry-level Ferrari was a cheaper route into the brand on release, and the kind of car you allegedly might have had to buy to unlock a few other more desirable Ferraris, but having driven one I can tell you firsthand it shouldn't be overlooked. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I drove it back to back with the 458, and while the 458 was of course the more performant car, the Cali was by far the most surprising. It was pretty well poised, didn't feel too heavy despite the hardtop convertible roof, and was super comfortable. And as I've recently taken up golf, it's not lost on me that you can fit a set of clubs in the boot with the central section of the rear seats dropped down. It's also a lovely place to be on the interior while you enjoy the sound of that 4.3 litre V8 block, making 453 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4 seconds, pretty rapid. And it's reasonably good value too, starting at around the 52k mark, and you'll find many available for under 75k. Roof and transmission issues seem to be the most common, typically resulting from faulty sensors. Matching the Cali on both engine and performance, just with slightly more power, is this, the F430, or the successor to the 360 we spoke about previously, and the predecessor to the 458 I drove. That's why it does actually look very similar to the 360, as it's more like an evolution on top of it, with a greater focus on downforce in particular to make it handle much better at high speeds. The design harks back to multiple former Ferraris, with the rear lights and cover vents coming from the Enzo, the mirrors styled after those on the Testarossa, and the front bumper being reminiscent of the famous 156 Shark Nose F1 car. It comes with a 4.3 litre V8 engine, which makes 483 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4 seconds, so plenty quick enough. It was a Pininfarina design, but in collaboration with the famous Frank Stevenson, a highly decorated car designer responsible for many of the most aggressive McLarens you'll see out on the roads. These will run you around £68,000 the bottom end, and you'll find many sitting at around the 90k mark. Two very common issues with these come from the exhaust brackets and manifolds cracking, which are known design flaws. Taking the top spot due to its performance, this also my personal favourite car on this list, the Ferrari 599, which picked up where the 575M left off as the flagship front-engined rear-wheel drive Grand Tourer. I mean, considering this is the predecessor to the F12 and 812 Superfast, the fact that you can get into one of these for £72,000 at the bottom end is pretty ridiculous, with most sitting at around the 100k mark. It comes with an insane engine block, a 6-litre V12 out of the Enzo, which puts out 612 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.6 seconds, but of course that engine has been slightly detuned for grand touring rather than hypercar use. The flying buttress design on the rear is pretty iconic, but all in the design is timeless, and it came as either a manual or F1 automatic, with that F1 box changing in just 100 milliseconds, not bad for its age. What's sad though is that very few people spec the manual box on these as their Grand Tourers, so you want to keep it as cruisery as possible. Just 30 were manual, and 10 of those ended up in Europe, with the remaining 20 destined for the US. For that reason, getting a manual is like hen's teeth, but what a cool car, a 6-litre V12 manual. It's a very reliable Ferrari as that engine is under stressed, but some owners have had problems due to overfilling with oil. And so there you have it, 10 of the cheapest Ferraris you can actually buy. Do hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on your favourite Ferrari. Massive thanks to the patrons for their support, and to you guys well for watching, and go check out this video on some depreciated Porsches.